Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Failure Decoded. I am solo hosting the show today, unfortunately, because my co-host Rachel was not able to join us. And we have with us a very special guest, Ashley Menzies Babatunde from LA. Hello, Ashley.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and I'm so excited for this conversation. But before we dive into it, I have to give a brief introduction, a very special introduction, and introduce you to our audience. So Ashley Menzies Babatunde is an attorney, graduate of Stanford and Harvard Law School. She's an activist, disruptive thinker, a natural storyteller, and of course, a podcaster. Her storytelling champions sentiments, empathy, intelligence, inclusivity, acceptance, vulnerability, and of course, agency. Ashley's podcast, No Straight Path, is listed in the HubSpot Creators Network, and it is a compelling podcast that operates from a place of truth, honesty, strength, acknowledgement, freedom, compassion, vulnerability, and courage, and draws in the listener almost instantly and organically. Intentional and successful at that, Ashley and her work across all boards is all about humanizing success stories, and that very profoundly overtakes everything else. So Ashley, that's from me, and I would like to hear more from you. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That introduction, that is the best introduction I've had. So thank you. Oh my gosh, I didn't, you wrote that based on the things that you've seen, which is so incredible. So I just feel so honored and grateful, and I feel very seen. Like, you see me and the work that I'm doing. And so I just want to say thank you, first of all, and I've never been called an activist, so we're adding that. I love that. Thank you.
You should call yourself one, because I did read about your work and the pro bono cases that you take on, and I feel like that's a lot of activism there.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am so many things. I love to start with the fact that I am human, just because I do like to center our humanity in all the work that I do. I am also a storyteller, as you said. I do a lot of that work through my blog as well as my podcast. And I am also an attorney, mostly white-collar investigations. I am a Black woman. My grandparents on my dad's side are actually from Guyana, so they immigrated to the States in the 1940s, and so I have a really big Caribbean influence in my life. I love the music, soca, and the food, the curry, the roti, all the things. And on my mother's side, my family's from the South in the States, so Arkansas, Mississippi, and they actually came to Los Angeles, my great-grandparents, during the Great Migration, when a lot of Black families were moving to the West. And so my parents met in Los Angeles. They had me, so I'm also a daughter, an Angelino, and a wife. I was just telling you, Shamsiya, that my husband and I, we've been married for 2 years, but we finally had our wedding because of the pandemic. So happy about that. A wonderful partnership. And I'm also a cousin and a friend. I really talk about that a lot because I'm an only child, and so I'm super close to my cousins and to my whole family, and relationships are really important to me. And so I also like to talk about that side of myself. So a lot of things.
Wow. That's like the first time I've heard people actually define themselves with respect to relationships and what they mean to others. And I find that's humanizing. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would want to do that now, next time I introduce myself. That's so beautiful.
Yes, do it. And then also, starting with your humanity too. Only because sometimes what happens to women is we often define ourselves by our relationships too, like what we're doing for other people as a mother, as a wife, as a X, Y, and Z too. So there's always a fine line, but it's also just honestly who I am. And so that's why I like to describe myself by those terms.
Yes, I think that's the reason why people have forgotten to do that. And they purposefully try to avoid doing that. Like I would maybe subconsciously try to avoid it, but getting back to doing that is again reclaiming your power.
Right.
Is what I see it as.
Yeah, because we're so dynamic as human beings and as women. And it's most things aren't mutually exclusive, I've learned in life. It's more of an and not an or.
Yeah.
So.
And it's strange that, how do you come to this? Okay, the show is all about failure decoded, and we have to focus on that failure story of yours. But tell me, how much of that failure or failures in your life mean to you and have impacted you and define you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's definitely been small failures, setbacks along the way, but the big one that I'll tell you about is the bar exam, because that's the thing that actually created there were a lot of lessons learned, I will say, from that specifically. So I am someone who grew up as an overachiever. Like, my family was very supportive, so it wasn't really instilled in that way, but it was certainly like I would say I was born intense. So I had to get every straight A, and I had to do everything perfectly. And most times in my life, when I tried hard, when I worked really hard to accomplish a goal, I achieved it. It wasn't easy, and there were challenges, but I usually saw the end results that I wanted to see. And with the bar exam, that was not the case. And specifically at Harvard, a lot of people tell you, the summer's gonna suck. Like, you have to study all summer. It's terrible, but like, you're at Harvard, you're smart, you'll get through it. And then once you take the exam, you'll feel like you failed, but you actually won't. So don't worry. So that was really the rhetoric that I was hearing. And so when I actually failed, there was just so much shock and devastation, and every negative word or feeling you can think of, I probably felt it in that moment, because it was just my first time failing something. And I just hadn't built that resilience muscle yet as much. I had some resilience. There's a lot of reasons I made it this far. So you had to take some resiliency, but I hadn't built that like failure, overcoming setbacks, resiliency. And so I learned a number of things. One, I learned that failure doesn't define me. I learned that accomplishments and achievements don't define me. It's more so the human qualities within you. So it's like that hard work ethic, that passion, that grit. Like, those are the human qualities that are never going away. And those are the things that actually define me. And I also learned to look at failure differently, to normalize it. This is just a part of life, and I'm grateful for every setback I've had. I may not be grateful in the moment, but in retrospect, you learn so much about yourself, and you learn so much about what you are capable of doing.
Wow. Because when I read the article, and I urge my audience to go and read the article, we will be putting it up on the show notes. It kind of like first of all, you're so creative and you're so good with words. And third, your experience was just spot on. It just brought in some repressed anxiety in me, because I've always been like, straight A's and all of that. But then I did fail 2 or 3 times in my academics, and it was like pathetic, the experience. I still get nightmares about it. So when I read your article, I was like, oh my God, this is like a bar exam, and it's like once and twice how much you have felt. I was like, just on the edge. Is that how it was?
Yeah, I mean, it was insane, definitely, because it was high stakes, right? Yeah. And so you try to normalize things and make sure, like, psychologically, that you aren't really putting that pressure on yourself, because that's actually going to help you succeed. But in the moment, it's so hard, because just to give the audience more context, since I haven't read the article yet, my job was on the line. So in order to become an attorney and actually practice law, I needed to pass the bar exam, but I also needed to pass the bar exam to keep my job. And I'd also been working 7 years, probably my entire life, honestly, to become an attorney, because there are just so many steps since high school, since middle school. I had like a plan of what class to take and how to do this and how, so there was just so much work behind it. And I think that's where I felt the pressure. And so it was definitely a really, really intense time, but I also was prepared because I had gone through the rigorous academic curriculum at Harvard Law School and at Stanford. And so I had been in 8-hour exams. I had been in 3-hour exams. I had competed to get on to a committee that's actually called like a legal writing advising committee, where I actually would, teach other law students how to perfect their legal writing. So I had been in high stakes. Oh, and I was an athlete. So I ran track at Stanford. I ran the 400. I've been behind. I've been able to catch up. So it was really, really hard, but everything in my life up to that point prepared me for that moment.
Yeah, that's like I always used to think if I was a little more athletic or into sports, probably I would take failure better, but I don't think so, right? Everyone has their own experience with it, right?
Yeah, no, I think everyone's different. I think that the first time, especially when you fail or you feel like you failed, is just really hard on anyone, and it is athletes too.
What about the stigma attached with it because of your parents and their expectations or society that you live in? Was that even of importance to you at that point?
It was not for my parents. My parents were very supportive, thankfully. And just as an only child, anything I do, they just think I'm amazing. So it's like a blessing and a curse. But it was societal, right? I have always been in institutions and organizations where people are at the top of their game. Right? So whether that be a D1 athlete running on the track, whether that's in the classroom at Stanford or Harvard, whether that's even before that, I was a paralegal at a firm where everybody went to Harvard Law School. So there is this culture where people don't talk about failure, where everyone is succeeding, on paper. And there is certainly a stigma. And so I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of embarrassment. I didn't want to share it with anyone. And it was also especially challenging being a Black woman in those spaces because I was always in these institutions of privilege where I was one of the only Black people in general. And so I felt like there was a heightened responsibility for me to perform and do well. Like my community was rooting for me. My family was rooting for me. Every little Black little girl who reached out about applying to law school was rooting for me. And I failed them. That is how I felt. And that was really, really tough. And that's the reason why, excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And that's the reason why I share stories on my podcast. And I shared my story on my blog because I don't want people to feel alone. And I want to dispel the shame that's attached to these failures and to these setbacks because they're really just another part of life.
Yeah. I just heard a couple of your podcasts and you talk about how in those moments you got to revisit your accomplishments and, think about what you've done, how you reached that point, live in that space, but then, try again. I'm not sure how easy that was at that point, but still, the third time you actually you passed. And how did you get the determination to work harder? I know you practiced with your boyfriend at the time and, you did all of that work. So how did you bring that determination to do it?
Yeah. So there are a few things. I think one was, yes, I thankfully had the support of my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, and studying with him every day was really great because I actually was studying alone each time and I tried to meet up with friends and everything, but just having a consistent study buddy, I think was extremely helpful. I think having my job not on the line anymore was very helpful because it released some of that stress and that pressure. And I think the third thing, a practical approach was important. I actually just was not studying for the exam correctly. So one thing I noticed is that when I was at Harvard, we talk about the bar right before graduation. That's it. And when I talked to other friends at different law schools, they had classes on bar prep, they had resources for people. And there was just a lot more information, especially the California schools. So I went back and I looked at the essays and I figured out what I was doing wrong. And I think that switch in approach was also helpful, because as a legal writing advisor, I was like, I know what I'm doing with writing essays. Like that's the part that I failed, which felt so crazy to me. But it was because they wanted you to actually spot the issues. People who are unfamiliar with law, what happens is for the bar exam, they'll give you a fact pattern. It's usually like of a real story that could happen in real life. Sue walks into the bank and Sue slips, and you have to pull out all of the different claims, like the negligence claim, and you pull out all of the different issues and you explore them in 30 minutes, I believe. And for me, I was pulling out 2 or 3 issues and just like pulling in all this legal knowledge I had learned from my various classes and trying to show like policy implications. And I thought I was just writing the best essay because that's what I had done in law school. But what they wanted was a different approach. They wanted more issues, get in and get out really quickly. So I think that was the other thing that I needed, the practical. And then from a psychological perspective, I will say that when you want something really badly and you have dreams and you are close and you've worked really hard for a really long time to get to where you are, you will surprise yourself with how resilient you are. You will surprise yourself with how much you can overcome. I think people often look at other people and they think, wow, that person is so strong. That person is strong, but I could never do that. I can't imagine. But it's like when you're actually in that situation and your back is against the wall, you'll show up, especially if it's your dream, especially if you work. I've been working since the 2nd grade to get to Harvard Law School. So I was like, to become an attorney. And something I didn't mention about just this being a dream is that I actually wrote a letter to myself when I was 10 years old with all of my goals. And one of them was to become a lawyer. And I just really wanted to make sure that I like saw it through. And so that's what gave me the motivation and the determination to ultimately pass the exam and go off to practice law.
Wow. Those are pretty strong and robust outcomes, and we have to list it out, which you have done for us. Thank you so much. I mean, I have learned so much. My audience is going to learn so much from this. But the strongest takeaway for me from here is it's something I resonate with, is something if you want something so passionately, we usually hold on to it so tight, the dream. So we don't want to let go, and then we are just like not doing it right. But once you kind of, as you did in your 3rd attempt, you just let it go, you relaxed, you were taking the right steps, and you trusted the process because of course you're intelligent, you're doing it all right, you're doing all the right steps. You went back, you audited what you were doing wrong, and now you rectified all of that, and then you're just taking the deep breaths and just taking it calm, and now that's how you emerged the winner, because you did not hold on to it, but you were holding on to your prep and yourself more.
That's 100% correct. That's a great assessment of exactly what happened. You're right. I let the dream go. I didn't let it go, but I loosened my grip on the dream so that I can actually achieve it.
Yeah. And is that why you had to fight against perfectionism? It's something that only people who are like you, intelligent, high achievers, talk about letting go of perfectionism. But I am always like, why do they have to do that? What motivates them to do that? Isn't it a good quality to have?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I talk about it so much on my podcast and with friends. So I think what happens is, and everyone defines perfectionism differently, I will say that it becomes problematic when you are tying your self-worth to perfection. It becomes problematic when you are paralyzed in your actions to move forward, to do something. So as an example, like this podcast, your podcast, my podcast, it's great, but it's probably not perfect because nothing is perfect. And so if you are so focused on making sure that everything is perfect, then we would have never put this out into the world. We have never put this content out. And so I think it can also be really paralyzing. It can also really affect your self-worth. I think those are like the two things that people struggle with, that I've struggled with. And so that's what I think when we're talking about perfectionism, that's the issue at least. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because I'm like, that's something you really need to write on your resume and highlight it. I don't know, like even Rachel, she keeps talking about how she has to fight the perfectionism. I'm like, no, it's okay. It's perfect. I like it,
Yeah,
Be that way.
Well, the other thing is there's like a healthier way to perhaps define it and to move towards it. And I think for me, it's probably a commitment to excellence is what I would say. And that I still work really hard and I want to put out a great work product. I want to do well in whatever I do. Even, oh my gosh, even with my wedding, I was a crazy person. But I was so happy with how it turned out because I put so much work into it. So much perfectionism, but you have to commit to excellence, I think was like the better approach for me because I was able to leave some things just there, even if I didn't feel like it was perfect. And another funny story really quickly just reminded me, when I go and speak to students, I'll talk about my journey, but I forget that I was like this, crazy overachieving kid. And so I leave my speeches sometimes and the teacher's like, that was great, but could you have told, you need to tell them to work hard and like work a little harder and commit to excellence or be perfect, or they didn't say those exact words, but I was talking a lot about like well-being and, like not being perfect, or I don't know. I'm sorry. Can we cut that?
We can do that.
Okay. I'm trying to define it. Let me think really quickly. Basically, I wasn't putting enough emphasis on the children, like their worth ethic and needing to work hard and needing to like strive for perfection because I was nervous about instilling my own perfectionism on them. And so it was really interesting, and where teachers were like, that was nice, but you're a little soft on the kids. You could have...
You're like, you gotta light that torch for them,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think, I get what you're saying. They just want you to push the kids because they don't want to do it. And that's why they've called you there, because they've seen you getting straight A's and how hard you worked. And they want you to rub off that energy onto them, right?
Exactly. Or I'm like, whatever your best is your best. It's okay.
Okay, really. Like, I don't know. Is that really a good thing to say to kids? Because I don't want to say that to my kid.
I don't know. I think I'm still working through what I want to tell my kids. I know that my parents told me my best is my best, and they were very supportive, and it worked for me because I was so intense. I think every child is different. I think added pressure for me would have been really challenging. I would have taken it so personally. So them saying do my best was like amazing, where my husband and like my cousins, there was a different approach taken because of their different personality types. So it really is kid specific.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason you were comfortable talking to the school kids that way, or students that way. I guess that's where it came from. Yeah. That's beautiful, actually. Yeah. I hope you have a recording of that, which you can share. I would like to hear that speech.
Thank you. I don't, not for that one, but there will be more.
Sure. How does it feel talking to people, connecting with, just people? You meet so many people, and you're a lawyer, obviously, you are in your field of work. You talk about humanizing stories, but how did that come about? Because when you meet so many people, you're constantly in touch with their stories, but you still talk about humanizing stories. So what is that? And where does that stem from?
Yeah, so it goes back to the initial story about the bar exam, which was the inspiration for the podcast, in that I felt like we weren't talking about the human stories behind our success. So when you look at my resume, you look at my LinkedIn, you will just see, fortunately, and I've worked hard for it, but like accomplishment after accomplishment, right? And so what I've noticed is sometimes in these conversations within my firm, it's like small talk and people are talking about the work that they're doing. And the biggest point of connections is when you like see their actual humanity. When someone talks about their kids, or when someone talks about something really vulnerable, And so that's what I aim to do. I realized that I didn't have enough stories to learn from. Like, I love when something challenging happens to me, especially, I love hearing another person's story and how they overcame that so that I can be inspired and move forward. And so that's really what I'm trying to do here. And I'm also just a people person. Like, I will probably know a person's practice group at my firm, but I usually just know, like, you know, if they're dating, if they have kids, where they've traveled to, what's their purpose in life, like, because it's just so much more rewarding and fulfilling. And I love learning from people. I think that that's the best thing ever. You can read so many books, but I think learning from your own personal experience, right? That's something that really sticks with you. And learning from other people's experiences is even more like gratifying, because you're not going to be able to experience everything in life, right? There's just not enough life to do that.
Yeah.
But you can take someone else's story and it can apply to your specific story in some way.
Absolutely. And now, especially with social media, we see only the good highlights. So really no stories beneath that we know of. Now you say that, you know, you connect with people and, you know, it's such a fulfilling experience. And yes, you're learning from other people's experiences and definitely becoming more intelligent. But is that easy to do? I mean, maybe it comes organically, but have you been in awkward situations, like when people have not been very comfortable talking about something that you want to know? It has happened with me. That's why I'm asking this to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You know, I'm sure it has, and I probably missed the social cue.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
In that I'm like, everyone wants to talk to me and share their story. But no, I think that you can feel people out, right? So you start with small talk. But then it often like leads to something deeper. And I think one way to do it is to share something personal about you, because what that does is it already creates a certain comfort level for other people. I've noticed I do that in my actual, day-to-day personal life. But now that I have this podcast and I have this vlog, I've noticed that more people are just even more comfortable sharing with me because I've already shared so much of my story. And so they know that I'm coming from a place of empathy and compassion. One thing I noticed about people is because there's so much polarization, right, in the world today. And it's been like this forever, but I feel like it's even, I don't know. I think it's more now based on some of the things I've read and what I've seen. I used to study political science in college, and there's certainly been an uptick in that. And then just like really tough rhetoric against one another. And with the advent of like Twitter, I'm not even really on Twitter, but like they're telling me Twitter can be toxic sometimes, all the things. I think that once you actually hear someone's personal story, they automatically become more beautiful. You feel like you understand them more and you have more empathy and compassion for them, even if you don't necessarily agree with their thought process or the things that they've done. And I think there's just a really strong power to emphasizing our humanity, to highlighting our stories. And it sounds perhaps a little corny, but I really think it's going to make the world a better place.
No, I think it sounds perfect, and it's a very beautiful thing. It's just like, it's such an instinctive thing, which over years we have tried and learned very hard to ignore. Now we're getting back to it, and it's called networking of sorts. But yes, instinctively, it's just connecting with people, building those relationships and organically learning from them and exchanging energies and, I don't know, whatever, warmth, love, hugs, just that, right?
Yeah, I know. I love that.
Yes. And I think that's the reason why your podcast, coming back to No Straight Path, is so compelling. Like when you listen to it, you understand it comes with such honesty and empathy. It's maybe because you talk to people and, you're understanding their stories, you're able to translate that and give it to the audience that's hearing you. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the way that I go through my process when it comes to No Straight Path is I started, like you said, connecting organically. Like I really started with friends and friends of friends who I knew had interesting stories that I think could really help other people. And certainly trying to show like various people's stories. Like I'll talk to athletes and I'll talk to activists and politicians and tech startup folks and lots of lawyers, because that's what I do. But we have teachers coming on and sports broadcasters. And I think that I didn't realize that I would connect so much with people whose walks have been so different from mine. And I think that's been an interesting thing where I just it was not a very intentional process starting the podcast. It was like, I just want to get these stories out here. I want to help people, inspire people. But I also realized I'm interviewing my friends and there's so much about them that I don't know. And the fact that we're having this conversation was really helpful for me. And so then I knew that it would also help other people. And so it's just been like a really wonderful experience. I'm loving it. I'm excited about what's next. I'm continuing to expand. I've gotten access to a whole new group and community of people through HubSpot. So I've been working with a lot of creators there. And
congratulations to you, because that's a big accelerator program and you're in it, you're listed in it. And I was like, wow. Actually, Rachel and I applied this July and we kind of didn't make it. So we were like, okay, that's our first failure and we need to talk about it. So we did talk about it if you listen to us.
Yeah, I'll definitely listen. No, thank you. And it's very competitive. Don't worry. Yeah. It's interesting though, because there's actually a lot more creator accelerator programs popping up now. So I'm excited to see what they're doing in this space because this is all very new. So yes, it's very competitive. And
so tell me about you being a podcaster and being the accelerator. And have you experienced any failure, or have you heard any stories of failure, or something very unique that has really stuck with you through this journey?
Yeah. So a lot of unique things. When it comes to failure, one thing that's really stuck with me is there was an episode I did with Mackenzie Thomas. I'm not sure if you listened to that one, but we went to law school together. She's had a very interesting path. She's I can't remember her exact title, but I know she's over ad operations at Meta. Started in the law and changed to business. And she had this really interesting perspective on failure. I remember using the word, and I could see her physically kind of look at me with, I don't know how to describe it, but tense up and say basically trying to stop me by saying, why are you even using this word? What are you doing? This is not something that should even be in our vocabulary, which was really interesting. And she was talking about how society, we give so much power to the word failure. And what it really is, it's just something that happens in your life. She's like, it sounds so negative, because that's the word she said. Negative is what she was saying. And that she doesn't see anything in her journey as a failure. It was just a necessary step to get her to where she is today. And that framing was really, really great for me. It was a great mindset shift. Because Mackenzie is someone, if you listen to the episode, she's experienced a lot of hard times in her life. She's overcome a lot of things. She's very successful. She's doing great. She's, so many facets of her life. But her perspective, even through the hardest times of her life, have always been more positive than I think a lot of people would respond to it. And I think it's just the way she views the world. She views the world, I think, a little bit brighter. And she looks at things as more so opportunities. And so it just made me really sit with that idea of failure. And I think it's easier to overcome things when you don't even view it as a failure.
That's very beautiful. And it's a very beautiful, as you said, the way to frame it. Failure could just be steps, that have to be taken for you to reach where you are now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel the same way? Or do you have some wisdom of yours to share? Some other kind of wisdom to share?
Yeah, so I would say I certainly am trying to feel the same way. So that is an aspiration for me and a goal for me to look at the world that way. Does it always work? No. But I do think that I know my approach to setbacks and failures. I think that's the word I usually use. I use setbacks. And what it is when you experience a failure or a setback, right? That means you were setting yourself up for success. That means you were doing something to get to the next level in your life, in your career. So you're only failing something or experiencing a setback if you're actually doing something. And like that was something that I really like to stick with. And I think the way that I move through these setbacks in life too is that I first honor the pain. I don't think that it's good to push down emotions. All emotions are important to feel at some point in your life. If you're feeling it, you should actually go through that emotion because I think you're going to be able to bounce back quicker. But I don't do it too long, right? I remember calling my dad and he was like, all right, I give you a week to be sad about this. And I was like, all right, Dad, I'm going to give myself 3 days. And that's what I do. And then I think about an action plan and how I'm going to move forward. So it's like you honor the pain, honor the feelings, and then you get into a mental space where you're like, okay, I can do this. What's next? What's my action plan? And you move forward from there. So that's how I've been moving through the world when it comes to failure and setbacks, while also trying to aspire to have Mackenzie's very positive outlook.
Thank you so much. You have given us a lot of tips here, a lot of takeaways, which our audience is going to just love. And I'm definitely going to, highlight it in gold print. Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm having the best time. Thank you.
Yeah. One last question. Do you think it's important to talk about failure or setbacks? Why do you think we should have these conversations more?
Absolutely. So that people feel less alone. I think that in life, we all want to have community. No one wants to feel lonely. No one wants to feel isolated. And so sharing our stories creates more empathy for people, like from both sides. So I think it's important to share failure and setbacks so that someone who's experiencing that can feel seen, can feel inspired. But I also think it's important for the person who perhaps hasn't experienced it yet and who may never experience it, gain a better understanding of what that person is going through so that they're not judgmental, right? Because we're all judgmental, but we can learn how to rein things in if we approach things with more curiosity, empathy, and compassion, as opposed to be like, oh my God, that girl failed the bar exam. Like, she's not smart. And if you hear my story, it's like, oh, she failed the bar exam. She'll work hard and pass it. I heard Ashley Menzies Babatunde's story and she did this. It just can normalize things. And that's what, not just setbacks and failures, but that's with everything in life where people feel lonely. That's with divorce. That's with, when people, sorry, I'm trying to think. We just had National Coming Out Day. That's when people are sharing their stories of coming out. That's when it comes to microaggressions and race in America. That's when it comes to even poverty. People have been sharing, low income people have been sharing their stories on TikTok, and they're humanizing what it means to live in poverty. Yeah. If we share our stories, we make the world a better place, and especially when it comes to setbacks and failures, so people aren't defining their self-worth by those things, because they're much more than that.
Yes, that's such an amazing way to look at things. Creating more stories is actually thinking outside of the existing storylines, which are, they're just there. They've been there. Nobody's challenged it. But now talking about these things is humanizing and gives all of us more power, be it successful, not successful, or people who've never going to, fail, as you said. It just gives them more perspective on things.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. Before we round it up, do you want to tell something to our audience? Do you want to plug in something? Where can they find you? Anything you want to add, you can tell us.
Absolutely. So you know that I love to connect. So I have a few platforms you guys can reach out to me on. LinkedIn, Ashley Menzies Babatunde there. I have an Instagram for my podcast, No Straight Path. That's no_straight_path. You can also connect with me on a personal level on my actual Instagram, my personal one. That's Miss Menzies, MS_Menzies, as well as my blog, ashleymenzies.com. And please take a listen to the podcast at No Straight Path. It's wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'm just excited to connect. And thank you so much for having me. This conversation has been really, really fun, inspiring, and enlightening.
Thank you so much. And we're definitely going to write all of that in the show notes so the audience doesn't have to worry. And thank you, Ashley.
I know it's a mouthful. Sorry.
There are a lot of platforms to connect, and you have to, because as I was telling earlier, she's a storyteller, and she's like, Ashley has this innate ability to write stories, talk stories, breathe stories. You never know. That's even possible. So yes, thank you, Ashley, for taking time out and talking to us about this. It was amazing. How do you feel talking about failure and your stories? How do you feel now?
Good. Yeah, don't mind it. If I can help someone, happy to do it.
Thank you so much. And before I end this, I also have to say that Rachel would have loved to be here, because Rachel and I wanted to talk to you together, but really, it's quite unfortunate that she wasn't able to, but she's going to hear this, and I'm probably write a feedback of what she thinks. She's missed this conversation. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye. I'm not disconnecting.
Bye.
We can talk.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Great. And I'm happy to meet Rachel another time too. So if you guys ever want to do something else at some point. Yeah. Because we're in the same kind of space. So maybe we'll do a talk or something. We can talk things and figure something else out. But that was really great. Thank you. Thanks for the thoughtful questions. Okay. So can you tell me about your background? I saw food science, you're a scientist. Tell me all the things.
Okay, so I'm wow. I am so off being a human, because I'm a scientist. I'm Shamsiya, and I'm Indian, from India. But I grew up in the Middle East, Saudi. I lived in Dubai for a while. I've also lived for a few years in UK, London, briefly in Florida, US, and actually, because I grew up in the Middle East, I didn't grow up in India, but you don't get any sort of a citizenship or residency in the Middle East, so you have to go back to India. So it's sort of you feel displaced. Yes. And then when you go back to India, it's even though you're Indian, you don't feel like the land belongs to you, because you've never been there. You never grew up there. You don't know the language they're speaking. You don't know the culture.
Yeah.
And it's just that whole existential crisis, and then just had to find my home somewhere. And voila, I'm in Canada, in Toronto, and just feel so beautiful staying here, living here, feel like I belong here. It's just because I wasn't allowed to stay in the Middle East, and I couldn't survive in India. I'm here now, but I'm so proudly an Indian. I love being an Indian. I love my Indian culture so much. Sometimes I just want to go back and live in India, but maybe sometime.
Yeah, and when you say Middle East, where exactly?
I was in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then briefly in Dubai.
Okay. Nice. I've been to Dubai.
Yeah, you like it?
Yeah, it was fun. It felt like Vegas, of the middle, the Middle East is Vegas. It looked like Vegas.
Yeah.
I was
true. Yeah, true. Dubai is like that. Dubai is one huge place. It's like a mall, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge mall city.
Exactly.
So I'm a scientist because, I'm not a practicing scientist. I have a PhD in obesity and nutrigenomics, and I worked in a research lab for 5-6 years, completing my thesis. And then I worked as a research assistant later on. But to officially call yourself a scientist, you have to be, employed in like a scientist level, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not really working as a scientist, but I have a PhD. So I have a doctorate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And where did you go to school? Were you in Canada for?
No, in India. That's where I went there for my education, because when you hit 18, you cannot stay in the Middle East, so you have to go back to where you came from. So I was in India completing my bachelor's and master's and also my PhD. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And then you said my kid. Do you have a child?
Yes, I do have a child.
Okay. How old is your kid?
She's going to be 3 soon.
Oh.
Yes, I do. And it's a constant debacle for me, because I come from, like, the Indian culture is, you're born, you either have to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. I think these are the 3 professions. So parents are like, it's decided. So you're constantly pushed into that. So we didn't have like, oh, you know what, your kind of upbringing. No, that doesn't exist. And I don't know if me being a parent, I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to be more relaxed and letting my child have more freedom in deciding what path they can take. But it's still so grilled into us, like we just start behaving that way. So I'm just trying to learn and be a more relaxed and liberated kind of a parent. Yes.
I love that. And then and I listened a while ago, I listened to like your first episode a while ago, and the last one I just listened to is a story. So I forgot, how did you and Rachel met through school? And then
No. When I migrated to Canada, that was like in 2019, I was pregnant with my daughter. And then after delivering her, I had this plan I had written down. Like after 6 months, I'm going to get back to, I had to finish some bridging course and then apply for a research position in the University of Toronto. And then the whole pandemic hit and all of that happened. And then I was like, it's just stuck with my daughter and stuck feeling like having no company. And that's when I started applying. I did enroll myself in the regulatory affairs course. It was a bridging program that I had to take to get into to start working here. And then I realized I can't really leave my daughter and go to work because it's the pandemic, there's nothing happening. There's nobody coming to come and help me. It didn't really seem possible. So I started applying to all these accelerator programs online, and there was this dark horse accelerator that I applied to, where they wanted to take me as a product manager for their product called Haven. And Rachel had also applied to the accelerator, but she came in with her own company. So she's a founder. She has her own company called Brightly Boxed. It's a gifting company. So she came in with her company, but I went there to work for another company. So we got trained in that accelerator program, and that's how we went.
Oh, okay. I love that. Very cool. Very cool. I have all these questions, but I know you probably have to go, so it's
it's okay. You can take your time, no problem.
Okay, I'll take 8 more minutes or 9 more minutes. That's amazing. And so are you a single mom? Is it because you're saying it's just you?
No, I'm married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a single.
I was like, this.
No, so when I was in India, that's where I met my husband. He's a businessman. So his name is Rehan.
Okay.
And I don't know. Honestly, I'll tell you what. When I was in the lab, so you're just working in the lab and you're just looking through the microscope and then you're just doing your work. You hardly meet anyone. You hardly talk to anyone. And yes, you go to these monthly defense meetings where you present your work. But then it's only now recently that I've actually started talking to people and enjoying socializing and, hearing stories. And talking about my personal life was never a thing. But now when people, ask me, I'm like, I don't even know what to say, It's almost like this. I've never said it before.
That's so funny. You just have to say, I'm married, I have a child, I live here. That's all.
That's all.
Easy.
Easy peasy for people, but trust me. And it's something, because I know of people who have slept in the lab for 3-4 days straight.
Yeah.
And they have families at home. They have kids at home. They haven't even gone home. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God, that's like, yeah, my husband works so much. He's a trial attorney, and I'm like, it's too much. But yeah, he's not sleeping in the office or anything, so that's good at least.
That's good. But I think that's one of the reasons I don't think I want to go back into research ever, because now I have a toddler and I am also like taking care of my husband, so I have to be more present. I cannot afford to sleep in the lab.
Yeah.
And but that's the kind of work it is. When you're a scientist, you have to be so obsessed, and you have to work with, I used to work with stem cells, and I used to do a lot of genetic manipulation. So you have to work with them. Like, they control your time. So it's absolutely impossible to have a schedule. It's absolutely impossible to have a life. So I don't think I can strike that work-lab life balance.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm married, and my husband's name is Rehan. He's a businessman. I met him in India, and yes, I have a child. He's 3, almost 3. Thank you for asking me this question.
Yeah. Very cool. No, I love that. One thing that I did not say on, so yeah, let's make sure whatever I'm saying right now does not go on the air or whatever.
Yeah.
But because we're still figuring out what's going on with my contract, but basically the big failure that I haven't like talked about yet that just happened, or like not big failure, but is that I didn't make it through the accelerator to the next round.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I was going to share it once I've like done the lessons learned and everything and figured out my next steps. But they're also creating, only one person made it, so there were 8 of us.
I'll just stop the recording so you can just talk about it.